Greetings, and thank you for joining this inaugural episode of a video series called Plugging into NIH Conversations and Connections. My name is Cynthia Dwyer, and I'm the Outreach Coordinator for NIH's Office of Extramural Research, also known as OER. I'm here with my colleague, Megan Columbus, OER's Director of the Division of Communications and Outreach. During our time together, we're going to dive into a series of changes the NIH is implementing for applications with due dates on or after January 25th, 2025, providing some background on each and how it affects the grants process for our community. Thank you for joining me today, Megan.
Cynthia, I'm happy to be here.
January 2025 seems so far away, but knowing what changes are coming that affect grant applications and how they are reviewed is important, especially when you're planning and writing your grant application months in advance.
Yeah, I agree. There's a lot happening, and we want to make the changes as easy as possible for the community to understand and plan for. One of the things that we've done to do that is to issue what we're calling this Uber guide notice. That's a notice that gives the community an overview about the changes that we're implementing. We haven't released the details of all those initiatives yet, but we will be linking future notices that provide those details back to that Uber notice. We've also developed the central webpage that will update information as it's released and resources are developed. And we'll be holding several webinars throughout the year to walk people through the details and allow the community to get their questions answered.
Those resources sound helpful. In all, what is changing for January 2025?
Sure. We're simplifying the peer review framework for most research project grant applications, which we announced in October of 2023. And through updates to application forms, that'd be moving to Forms I now, we'll be capturing the information needed to implement many other changes, including improving NRSA fellowship applications and peer review. Many people may have seen that request for information about the proposed changes. We'll be making updates to the NRSA training grant applications. We'll be updating reference letter guidance. And we'll be implementing common forms for both the biographical sketch and the current and pending other support forms in early 2025. And each of these initiatives has its own specific goals, but all are meant to simplify, clarify, and or ensure greater fairness and a level playing field for applicants throughout the application and review process.
Great, thank you. Well, let's go ahead and get started learning more about each of these changes, beginning with the Simplified Review Framework. In 2023, the NIH received more than 51,000 research project grant applications. Fast forward to 2025, the NIH is implementing its first change to the peer review process in over a decade, a simplified review framework that will impact the peer review of most research project applications submitted for January 25th, 2025 due dates and beyond. This is really significant news, Megan. What led NIH to make these changes?
Well, for many years, NIH has been hearing frustrations from the review community about the complexity of the peer review process, the increasing responsibilities being assigned to peer reviewers around policy compliance. NIH has also heard concerns about the influence of reputational bias. That's the reputation of institutions, and or investigators, both positive and negative, on peer review outcomes. Through the efforts of multiple working groups and considerable community feedback, NIH is implementing the Simplified Review Framework in an effort to address both the complexity of the peer review process and that potential for reputational bias to impact peer review outcomes.
It's good to hear why these changes are occurring and to see the collaboration with the community. You stated that applicants won't be directly affected by this change. So do you mind elaborating on what is impacted by these changes?
Sure. The Simplified Review Framework is not expected to change the way applicants prepare or submit their applications. Instead, the framework will impact the review process itself, right? So the 5 scored review criteria defined in federal code, right? That's significance, innovation, approach, investigator, environment. Those are being reorganized into 3 factors. The importance of the research, right? That's should the research be done? Rigor and feasibility. Can that research be done? And expertise and resources. Are the resources sufficient to do the research? Rather than receiving 5 separate scores, reviewers will assess applications on these 3 factors. The first 2 receiving a numerical score, and that third, expertise and resources, being evaluated as either sufficient or that additional expertise or resources are needed. However, all 3 factors, those will be used when arriving at the overall impact score.
So the third factor won't receive a numerical score. Is that what I heard?
It won't. Yeah, the change is to having peer reviewers assess the adequacy of the investigator expertise and those institutional resources as a binary choice. It's designed to have reviewers evaluate the investigator and the environment specifically in the context of that work being proposed. It's intended to reduce the potential for general scientific reputation to have an undue influence. Factor 3 is considered when assessing the overall impact score of the application.
These are important changes. There's no doubt that our community is going to want to learn more about the simplified review framework.
Yeah, we already held one webinar in November of 2023, and that provided an overview of these changes. That recording is available to view from our website now. On April 17th, coming up, a follow-up webinar is planned where we'll discuss those changes and what the community can expect as we begin reissuing funding opportunities for due dates on or after January 25th, 2025, to ensure the funding opportunities reflect the new peer review framework. We'll also be talking about the timing of the reissuances as they relate to the availability of Forms I version of our application forms, which will be available later this fall. It's important to know that between now and this fall, the community can expect to see funding opportunities posted for due dates beginning in January of 2025 without application forms. So these forms will be added to the opportunity once they're available this fall. But applicants can go ahead and begin working on their application attachments before the forms are out, using the instructions for the current forms.
I'm glad you clarified that the funding opportunities may not have a form posted with them right away, but that this should not stop an applicant from beginning work on their application. Where can someone find more details and resources as well as register for that upcoming webinar?
We have a comprehensive website on simplifying review of research project grant applications that provides a wealth of information and links to resources. We'll be continuing to add to these resources, and by early 2025, we'll have things like training for reviewers to be sure that we're all on the same page as we implement the simplified review process changes for research project grants. It's really, it's quite exciting.
It really is. We'll be watching for more to come on this important change to the NIH peer review process. So now let's turn to changes to NRSA fellowships, which support valuable individualized research training programs for developing scientists. Currently, efforts are underway to enhance the fairness and effectiveness of the fellowship review process. The goal is to ensure that we identify the most promising trainees and the excellent individualized training opportunities that will enhance future outcomes for researchers in early stages of their research training careers. I understand that the community should expect an NIH guide notice to be published this spring that outlines the details of changes to the process, but it would be great if you could share some background with us.
Yeah, we do expect to publish details in the next few weeks, but here's just some background. There's been persistent concerns that NRSA fellowship review may be disadvantaging some highly qualified, promising applicants. A Center for Scientific Review Advisory Council work group took a close look at the data and analyzed comments that the NIH had been receiving. These data showed that a small number of institutions submit the majority of those fellowship applications, and theirs do better in review, as do those with senior sponsors. An analysis of comments to the NIH showed strong concern about bias that favors those well-funded labs and those senior scientists.
Really? So what did the working group conclude?
Well, the conclusion was that NIH is potentially leaving out highly promising scientists because the process too heavily favors elite institutions, senior well-known sponsors, and an overly narrow emphasis on traditional markers of academic success. The working group recommendations were to revise the review criteria and to revise a fellowship application to align with those criteria.
And what did NIH do with those recommendations?
After many discussions, NIH issued a request for information in June of last year, and we asked the community for their input. And you can find a summary of that feedback from the RFI on our Improving NRSA Fellowship Application and Review webpage. Since then, NIH has carefully utilized input from the extramural community to revise the application and the review criteria to ensure they are aligned, with our goals.
I'm sure the decision-making and implementation process has been quite an undertaking.
Yeah,
You mentioned ensuring that the application information and the review criteria are aligned with the goals. Can you tell us more about those goals?
Yeah, absolutely. We're looking to better focus reviewer attention on 3 key assessments. Okay, so the fellowship candidate's preparedness and potential, the research training plan, and the commitment to the candidate. We're also looking to ensure a broad range of candidates in research training contexts can be recognized as meritorious. And we're also looking to reduce bias in review by really emphasizing the commitment to the candidate without the undue consideration of the reputation of the sponsor and the institution.
I know the details of the changes are coming in a few weeks, but is there anything else that you can highlight for the community now?
I think it's important for the community to understand that the application materials for candidates and their sponsors will be changing in several important ways under the new criteria. So, a previous application won't have the exact same structure as a new application. People who are considering applying should know that the new review criteria helps give fair consideration to candidates with early career sponsors. It gives consideration to applications from a variety of institutions, as well as, candidates from a broad range of backgrounds. One change that many will welcome, actually, is that grades will no longer be required or even allowed in that application.
Well, where can the community learn more as they plan their application for the due dates on or after January 25th, 2025?
All right, so once the guide notice of more details is published, the webpage that currently houses information about the fellowship RFI, it'll reflect the upcoming changes found in that guide notice, along with a host of other resources. Since the first standard due date in 2025 for NRSA fellowship applications isn't until April, we went ahead and scheduled a webinar to further explain the changes, and that webinar is in September. And it'll share the latest updates and offer opportunities to get questions answered from our NIH experts as people continue through the application process. And of course, we'll have lots of resources and training for reviewers planned as well.
Well, we'll be looking for those details in the guide notice this spring and the webinar this fall.
Great.
Now let's talk about reference letters. Reference letters play a vital role in providing external validation of an applicant's qualifications and the merit of their proposed research project. I understand that among the changes we've been discussing, NIH is also modifying its instructions for reference letter writers. Can you tell us more about these changes?
Oh, absolutely. NIH is updating the instructions candidates send to referees to provide more structure to those reference letters. It's our hope that the resulting letters will better assist reviewers in understanding the applicant's strengths and weaknesses and potential to pursue a productive career path in biomedical research.
I'm curious, how do the updated instructions provide more structure?
Well, they ask referees to consider a few different things in their letters. First, to provide examples of some of the candidate's personal characteristics that are most likely to contribute to the success of a candidate's defined career path. They also ask referees to identify areas for development that would improve the candidate's chance of success in their given field. And finally, they'll ask for an overall assessment of the candidate's preparedness and the likelihood to succeed in their research training goals.
So it sounds like the goal is to provide the reviewers with a clear and more comprehensive picture of the candidate. What applications are going to be actually affected by this change?
Yeah, that's exactly right. The goal is to encourage letters that capture the whole candidate so reviewers can identify the candidates that are most likely to benefit from the training and join the research workforce. Those new referee instructions, those are going to apply to all applications requiring reference letters for due dates on or after January 25th, 2025. So that includes those for fellowships, those F awards, and the mentored career development, those K awards. And we'll be posting them on the reference letter page of the How to Apply application guide this fall.
Great. These details are very helpful. We'll be watching for those updated posts to the instructions
Mhm.
later this year then.
Sounds good.
Let's turn our conversation to changes to NIH institutional training grants. These training grants are key to training future researchers and professionals in fields critical to biomedical research and public health. Megan, I recently heard that changes are being made to the application for National Research Service Award NRSA training grants, specifically to data tables and the PHS 398 Research Training Program Plan Form. Can you tell us about those changes in the training grant applications?
Yeah, you heard right. This is another one where the guide notice with the details has not been published yet, but I'm happy to provide an overview of what's happening in the goals. There will be changes to the data tables and the training program plan form that'll affect all the training grant applications and other applications using the T forms, such as those K-12s, submitted for due dates on or after January 25th, 2025. An example of a change is that the recruitment plan to enhance diversity, that'll become its own attachment instead of part of the 25-page program plan. And NIH is further defining expectations for mentor training and for career outcomes.
And what are the goals of those changes?
There are several key purposes. Update the NRSA data tables to reduce applicant reviewer burden. It's always good. Include training in responsible conduct of research and a recruitment plan to enhance diversity as items that contribute to the overall score. Enhance research training programs by further defining expectations for mentor training and for clarifying positive outcomes related to preparing trainees for the breadth of research and related careers relevant to NIH's mission.
Well, these changes sound great. And as a former teacher, it's great to hear that there will be clarity on expectations for mentor training among all of the other changes. Where can our research training community find more information about the training grant program and the updates on these changes?
Well, the NIH grant site with data tables will be updated later this year with the revised tables and with the guidance explaining the changes. On June 5th of this year, we're hosting a webinar focused on these training grant changes. And during this event, attendees will have the opportunity to get more details from NIH experts and, importantly, to ask questions during a Q&A.
Wonderful. I know Dr. Erica Boone and Dr. Kenneth Gibbs will be presenting the details for those webinars. They're sure to be engaging and informative presentations. I also know our community will not want to miss those updates. Megan, thank you for providing that valuable overview. Turning to Forms I. Grant application forms capture details essential for peer review and assessment, crucial for determining an award. The NIH regularly updates its application forms to account for changes affecting the way applicants prepare their funding applications. Given all of the changes that go into effect in January 2025, what are NIH's plans regarding updates to its application forms?
Well, the community should understand that NIH is transitioning from Forms H to Forms I for all the applications submitted on or after January 25th, 2025. And we published a guide notice that lays out the timeline for the use of those forms.
There are numerous changes coming in January. Could you reiterate for us which ones will be incorporated into the new forms?
Sure. As I said, there are no form changes related to Simplified Review Framework. That initiative impacts how applications are reviewed rather than how they're prepared. For changes to fellowships and training grants, changes to the PHS Fellowship Supplemental Form and the PHS 398 Research Training Plan Form will be reflected in the new Forms I.
So the big follow-up question, when should applicants expect the new forms to be released?
Forms I packages will become available in the fall of 2024.
Okay, and in terms of timing, if updated forms will be available this fall, when will applicants be able to start preparing their applications?
Well, even before those new forms packages become available, applicants can go ahead and begin drafting applications using updated funding opportunities when they start to become available later this year. And they can go ahead and use those existing Forms H instructions for the attachments. Of course, applicants will need to potentially adjust the drafts for any changes that may be introduced by new forms once those packages are available, but they will have done the bulk of the work.
So what I'm hearing is you don't have to wait to start your
Right.
application. You
Right.
can use the updated funding opportunity and existing instructions. Then just adjust your draft once the new forms package is out. Well, our community will surely want to be able to stay up to date on the latest details regarding these new forms. So where can they learn more?
Well, we published a notice just now announcing the transition to Forms I. And you can expect a notice announcing the availability of the instructions once they become available this fall.
Great. We greatly appreciate the clarification of what changes are included in the Forms I package and how to stay in the loop. So there is good news on the horizon for applicants and recipients, summed up in just 2 words: common forms. As part of a directive from the Guidance for Implementing National Security Presidential Memorandum, NSPM 33, the Research Security Subcommittee of the National Science and Technology Council has developed common forms to be used by research agencies for the biographical sketch and current and pending other support. Megan, I have a feeling those 2 words, common forms, have piqued the interest of our community. Although the NIH has not yet announced the details of this implementation, is there anything you can share with us about what is coming?
No, of course. As you know, NIH's biosketches and other support forms are an important part of the NIH grant application. They provide key disclosures that allow agencies to assess how qualified individuals are to conduct the proposed activities, and they help address any potential scientific and budgetary overlap or duplication within the project being proposed. Currently, federal agencies use different formats for these forms, which has been especially frustrating for investigators and institutions supported by multiple agencies. Policy leaders at NIH and the National Science Foundation and other federal agencies have worked hard to come together to identify the common elements to make up the new common forms. It's really been a tremendous effort.
There are so many benefits of common forms for applicants, recipients, and reviewers. When can the community expect to learn more?
NIH will be issuing guide notices later this year that'll provide all the implementation details. And I expect we'll have a webinar to walk the community through the changes later this year. NIH will begin requiring the use of the new biographical sketch common form and the current and pending other support common form for applications and RPPRs submitted in 2025 sometime. More information will be coming soon.
Well, thank you for that, the overview of upcoming changes. Is there anything else that you would like people to know?
Yeah, we know this is a lot at once. And we're committed to providing the community with the resources to help navigate all these changes. We have created the central webpage that will serve as a central source of information for these changes. So as guide notices with details are published over the next few months, as webinars are announced, as additional resources become available, you can find them all on this webpage.
Great. From simplifying the review framework for research project grants to moving to the common forms, we've navigated through changes that are designed to reduce bias, provide clarity, and improve the overall grants process for all. Megan, thank you for helping us navigate through all of these changes. And a big thank you to all of you for joining this recording of Plugging into NIH Conversations and Connections. We hope in our short time together that you've gained valuable insights from this discussion and felt our commitment to supporting you through these changes. On behalf of the NIH, thank you for your contribution to the research enterprise. Let's keep up the conversations and stay connected.
All right. And thank you, Cynthia.